Okay. I don't see any attendees just yet. Hello, welcome. One by one. Welcome, everyone. Welcome on in.
Might be too nice out today, Jacob. I don't know who wants to sit in front of their computer.
That's right. Well, hey, if you got a laptop, go bring it out on the deck.
Right.
All right. I'll give it another minute or two to some stragglers come in.
That looks pretty good, Jacob. I think we can probably kick us off.
You know, I think so too. All right. Let's see. All right, welcome everybody to SharePoint Beyond the Basics. My name is Jacob Heath. I'm one of your co-hosts here from CompuWorks, an account manager there. So before we begin, why don't we take a look at an upcoming event as well? We've got ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. What is it and how to get started? Some productivity tips for hybrid workforce and ChatGPT as a business tool. Definitely a popular topic, hot topic. It's AI is coming out really fast and it's ever evolving even faster. So definitely something you're going to want to look into. Maybe if you've been thinking about automating some of your business processes, it's something you're going to want to attend.
Does it seem like AI just kind of came out of nowhere, Jacob? I mean, and I know obviously it didn't, but it just seems all of a sudden it's just exploding. You know, there's so many new products. You know, in our space, we see it all the time. You know, AI-enabled software tools and all kinds of things. So really, really relevant and timely topic.
Yeah, and ChatGPT has kind of been the spark to kind of ignite it all. So this will be a good one. Definitely a hot topic. All right, and lastly, just before we get into it, just some webinar etiquette. You can use the Q&A button down at the bottom right next to the chat function. If you have any questions, you know, we'll try and answer them as we go along. But if we don't, we've got some minutes at the end of the session to answer those questions as well. Also, within about 24 hours of this webinar, we will send out a survey for feedback on how we did. And also there's a section for you to suggest topics that you might be interested in the future. We definitely are looking forward to those pieces of feedback. We're always looking forward to, you know, how we can better educate ourselves and everyone around us and make technology really align with your goals. So definitely check that out once it comes up. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce you to CompuWorks founding partner and my co-host, Alan Bauman.
And the guy with two dogs who are barking at the UPS guy right now. So we all know what that's like. Yeah, you know, I just wanted to make one additional comment on AI because I do think it's a really thought-provoking topic. And I was listening to the radio over the weekend, and the show was all about AI. And the host posed this question, and the question was, when you think of AI, do you equate it more to the printing press or the atomic bomb? And I thought, yeah, I'm not really sure that I know the answer to that one yet. I don't think any of us do, but I thought, you know, that's a little something for you to think about. Anyway, that's not the topic of today's conversation. We are going to be talking about SharePoint, a little bit of a step up beyond the intro SharePoint that we've done in the past. So SharePoint Beyond the Basics. Another one of these topics where I think there's a lot of need for education and knowledge. I find that there's a lot of confusion about what SharePoint is. In some ways, it kind of seems like it's everywhere, but people have a hard time getting their hands around it and figuring out what to to do with it. I think, the confusion has maybe increased a little bit with the rise of Teams, because there's a lot of overlap between SharePoint and Teams, and understanding that relationship, I think, is helpful. So we, as usual, have our superstar instructor, Jolynn Reen, here today. Always happy to have Jolynn. She's got a resume as long as my arm, which I won't repeat to you, but always happy to have you here, Jolynn.
Thank you. Super excited about this topic here today.
Yeah.
And can't wait for the chat GPT.
Mhm.
So let's go ahead and get started with our SharePoint Beyond the Basics. So when we talk about this app called SharePoint, I like what Alan said. Some people aren't really sure what SharePoint is, kind of that cross between Microsoft Teams and SharePoint. Which one am I using? Which one should I be using? I'll talk a little bit more about that in our session here today. But starting out, just kind of talking about what exactly is SharePoint. So when we talk about the fact that we have these SharePoint sites, what that basically is going to be meaning to you is that it's like a website. So if we could imagine having a place where all coworkers could go to find information related to your organization, we can have what is referred to as a hub site that we can have everybody kind of congregate to, and then branch off to that into subsites, which I'll get to the description of what all that means, and see specific information related to their department. Or if they're a staff member of a department, we could have specific access to another site. So we'll kind of break down. And every time I'm saying this word site, by the way, SharePoint, when we build a SharePoint site, it's like building a website. So we have our company website that we go to. And if we think about how we navigate that company website and what we provide for, our customers and everybody to come and visit to find out what it is that we do those same things with SharePoint. But SharePoint has a couple of kind of two sides to it that I want to talk about today and demonstrate for you as well. So we are using the SharePoint online version. Online basically means it's cloud-based. Like a website, you can access it by going to any internet browser. So how do we access a site? Well, one way, log into your Microsoft account. So that's what you're seeing when I'm in mine right now. I'm logged into my Microsoft account. I can simply go to my apps launcher. I can click on SharePoint from this drop down, and it's going to take me into the user interface of the homepage of SharePoint app. So SharePoint is a software program that we use. So this is kind of like your main menu coming in this way. So basically what you're seeing, and why I like this, is because SharePoint allows us to have news. So when you come in, you could see anything related to any of your SharePoint sites. If there was new news that was posted, you're going to see that right away at the top where it says news from sites. But then you're going to see your frequent sites. Is this how I access my frequent sites? No, not usually. I usually go to a shortcut that I added in my internet browser. Whether it's a bookmark or you saved it as a favorite, that's how we usually access our SharePoint sites, because it is a web address. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to open up an intranet site that I have as a kind of a test training site. So when I come in, you can see in the address bar, it's like a normal website address. It's a URL. So we can actually save it as a shortcut on your desktop or wherever you need it to be saved at. I even have quick access from Microsoft Teams to get to a SharePoint site. Another day for that, but when you come into your SharePoint site, of course, SharePoint is set up. So I'm hoping that everybody is kind of familiar with these aspects of SharePoint because this is beyond the basics. So when you come into a SharePoint site, this particular site happens to be what is called a hub site. So what that means is it is like, if we think of a hierarchy, it's the top level of the hierarchy. And then this is where everybody in my organization can come to see standard information about the company. They can branch off from here to go into their own department. So not every SharePoint site is going to be an intranet. It can be available for external users as well, but a lot of times they are intranets. Now, even through my intranet, I could have external access, so I could have vendors having access to my department site or my staff site or another site that I have that is a branch off of my main hub. So when we think about the main hub as being the top level of the hierarchy, the next level can be all of our sub sites that are connected to the hub site so that we have quick, easy navigation to get into any of our departments. So as an example, if I go to the top of my window where it says our intranet, clinic, healthcare, training, those are actual navigation that's available from the hub. Every site that I go to under the hub will have that same navigation. But then each individual site will have its own navigation. We have what are called communication sites and team sites. This is a communication site where we want to communicate information to whoever visits our site. So we want to think about how people are going to navigate. Now, what ends up happening is we get control of, I can create a site. So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to create a site and I'm going to invite all these people to it, but I haven't really built it. I invited all these people, but they don't really have anything to see. We have made some mistakes along the way sometimes when we are starting with SharePoint. So I did put a little bit of information in a handout. I forgot if you guys share the handout or not right away, or if they get it after the session, but you want to think about building a SharePoint site, but plan before you build. Always plan before you build, because otherwise there's common mistakes that are going to happen. One of the biggest mistakes is not planning. What kind of content needs to be on the site? What are we going to name it? Who needs to have access to the site? How are they going to navigate or find things? What kind of document libraries are we going to have available? What kind of lists are we going to have? Are there going to be pages? I could go on and on about, kind of planning and figuring out what exactly we need to have in our site. But even beyond that, what about security? You have to plan for your security, because when I was just describing, we have this hub site, then we have these sub sites, which can have their own sub sites and or pages. And then we have all this content that goes in it. Who needs to have rights to what content? So there's an administrator. So we usually have a group of people that will be responsible for certain areas of SharePoint. We have administrators in the background that will say, yes, we can access have external access to our site. Here's the people that are going to be owners, members, or visitors of the site. So we have these permission levels to say, this site can have these people access it. These sites have these people. These sites have these. So we can get down to a level of saying the only people that can access this site will be the people that are in that department. So they're staff members, they're employees of that department. They're the only ones that can get in there, because we might be putting information just related to the staff. So you want to kind of think about your strategy as to how you're going to make everything secure. Of course, Microsoft has these wonderful features built into it to create these policies where we can have different compliance and things in the background. That's where that role of the admin comes into play. We can let them take care of all of that. But there's sometimes going to be what are called stewards, or Microsoft calls them champions, where they might be, let's say that I'm in the training department and I'm not designing the hub, the main intranet page, but I'm going to take care of the training page and the staff for the training page. So I might have 2 sites that I'm responsible for. So I'm going to be a champion and have rights to be able to modify those parts of the sites. I don't need to do the admin side of things. I may not want to do that. We can let the administration take care of those kind of things. So we want to be very aware of, kind of planning things out and the settings to a site, because there's a lot of settings that are kind of composed of the background of every application you work in. There's going to be default settings, and there's going to be settings that you're going to want to know how to change. So let me explain a little bit of that. What am I referring to when it comes to these settings? Just like Outlook, just like Excel, PowerPoint, all of your other apps, there's always the background to the programs. So of course, SharePoint has a background. If I go to the gears icon at the top right, that will give me a menu of different choices. Well, one of them is, of course, this is a hub site. So I'm seeing hub site settings. Whew, that was a mouthful. Hub site settings. But if I want to just go into the site information, I can click on site information. What that's going to do is allow me to go in and change the name of the site. I could do a few other things, but what I'm really going into is viewing all site settings. I want to go in and see all the site settings. So every site, no matter if it's the hub or a sub site, they have site settings. Because as you can see at the top left, users and permissions. So if I'm the administrator or a steward / power user of the program, I might be able to come in and do my site permissions. I could say, here's what we're going to have available. Here's what these people can do. This group of people can do, etc. So we have these different permission levels. We can do those right in the site, or we can do things back in the admin of SharePoint as well. Lots of choices from within here. We even have search options. We have different site collection administration, which basically what that means is we have different content that goes into a SharePoint site. This content, like document libraries, lists that we use. There's several other types of content that we can create or that come with SharePoint. We can manage all of that. We can manage how things work and whether people see them or not see them. We can even do the overall look and feel of a SharePoint site so that we stay consistent with our company colors and our company fonts and things like that, so that we have that consistency throughout. All of that can be managed by whoever is going to be the owner of the site, and or sometimes the power users. Okay, so I'm going to actually just do my back arrow to jump back to the site itself. So we need to kind of think about, before we build, what settings are we going to need for our site? So we need to think about permissions. We need to think about actually policies, procedures, who's going to be responsible for what. So most sites are, whether it's a hub site or just a site, can have multiple levels to them. And then we can control each site to have different permission levels. If I don't have permission for a sub site, I won't even see it on my navigation. We can target the audience for some of the content and objects that we're going to be putting on our SharePoint sites. So we have multiple levels that a SharePoint site can have: a hub site, subsites, subsites to our subsites, etc. And then your sites, of course, could have pages to them. Think about your own website. Look at your website. When you click on a link to go someplace else, think about, where did you come from and where are you going to? We designed SharePoint just like that. We have different categories that are our main categories that they can click on. Then they're seeing just information related to that category. So when you think about your products and your services that you're displaying on your site, your website, think about how you could do that in SharePoint. Works the same. And I actually think SharePoint is a little bit easier than designing websites. I've designed websites for years and used several different applications, and I don't do code. And here in SharePoint, I don't have to do code either. I can use web parts. So when you're looking at my site that I have open right now, these images, I didn't create this content. I can change the images, I can change the text, but this is actually called a web hero. These images, I have 5 images right now in my web hero. I could change it to 3, whatever, but this is part of how you build your site. We use this different web parts when we create a site to put content available for people to see. So if I'm in a communication site, which is what I'm in right now, we have communication sites and we have team sites. Those are the 2 main sites that we use in SharePoint. A communication site is for communicating information to a group of people. I want to provide some news. I want to give them, quick access to get into whatever information they need to see. A lot of times we use a hero to do that, where we have an image, we have text, and they can click on it to automatically go someplace else. So I just happen to have a link that went to a website. Okay. I didn't set all these up. You can see I have one called healthcare. I could click on that and it's taking me to another site, which is a subsite of my hub site, to take me directly to healthcare. From here, I could navigate into issue trackers. I could go into resources, who we are, how we work. I have so many different links across the top of where I could go, or I could use another hero. So when we talk about site content and we talk about what we're going to give access to for the people that are visiting our sites, we want to think about what do they need to see. So if they're coming into the department called healthcare, what information do we want to provide them? So let me take you into the background of this. At the top right, I'm an owner of this site. I have permissions to edit. So at the top right, I see this pencil for edit. When I click edit, your sites are set up in sections, just like we design a website in most applications. So basically the top of this is a hero that is taking up the entire section. Great navigation, great way to see images. We can replace the images and what it's linking to very quickly and easily. We can manage any content or add web parts at any time. I have a list that I can add over on the right-hand side. I have quick links that I put in. I have a button that I added as a web part that they can click on to get support. As I scroll down, I can add as many web parts as I need. Let me show you what I mean. In this section, which happens to be a 2-column section, I have a section on the right, a column on the right, a column on the left. I'm going to add a web part by hesitating at the top of this section of this column, and I get a plus sign. If I click on it, it automatically will give me a list of all the different web parts that I have access to. It was a little slow, sorry. So I'll see frequently used. Let me just mention a couple of these as I go through the list, but the text, the media, and the content group, there's a hero, or if I just wanted an image, or maybe I want an image gallery. I also could be scrolling down into my document libraries. I could add lists. I could be adding in recent documents. I can be adding in news feeds coming from Yammer or Twitter or other social media type sites. I can even do in the news, people, and events category. I can be bringing in people, which gives you a link to people within your organization. So it's feeding from your Azure, from your global address list, where then you're going to have access to the people within your organization or your org chart. Or I could do an event and everybody can have, I could even do a countdown to the event. So let's say your organization is going to hold a blood drive. You're going to do continuing education. We could add those to an events calendar that everybody can see. We can add in a Microsoft form that they could register directly for the event, and we could show a countdown to how many days, even getting down to the seconds before the event starts. It's amazing the different content that can be added into a site. As I scroll down to the data analysis, here's Microsoft Forms. I could do Power BI items, etc. Regional information. If I'm going to be doing, let's say I'm going to actually do an event that's going to be held in Vegas. I could add in a map so they know where to go in Vegas. I could add in the weather so they know what the weather's going to be like in Vegas. So there's so many different parts, web parts that can be added to your SharePoint sites or pages. So clocks, and then it gets into more of the advanced options with some more power features that we have built into SharePoint. Very popular is to have quick access to a document library. So I'm going to click on document library, and it wants me to choose which document library from my site do I want to connect to. I'm going to just go to documents, because this site doesn't have many document libraries. So I'm going to go to documents, and you can see my document library is now available right on this main page for this site. So we come in and we just design the site by using sections to organize the information. We add in web parts. And if it's a communication site, we even have a footer down at the bottom that we can be working with. When I'm done, I'll click publish, well, or republish. If I've already published it, it will be republish. And now everyone has access to everything that I just changed or added. Here's an example of people, by the way. If these were people within my organization, I would be able to hesitate and see their profile circle. Plus their profile circle would show their image if you have that in Azure. So it's amazing. We can have different news. We can incorporate videos. But here's that document library. Actually, I added the same one twice. It's in two different locations because I'm just playing with this site. But this document library is one of the main components of a SharePoint site, whether it's a communication site or it's a team site. But this was a communication site. And I want to just communicate information that anybody that comes to the healthcare site, what do they need to see? Do they need to see news? Do they need to see our upcoming events? Those kind of things. But if I want to have connections directly to Microsoft Teams, I can have a team site. So this is a communication site where we really want to communicate and provide information. But I'm going to go to a site called Clinic. Now I had difficulties getting to that Clinic site here last time. I'm sorry, I forgot to fix it. Let me just get to it another way. Sorry about that. Because we have lots of ways to get to our sites. So this is actually a Clinic site that I just threw together just to kind of give you an idea as to how a team site can work. A team site gives navigation on the left-hand side. A communication site has navigation across the top. And that navigation is directly related to the site you are on. The navigation at the top is our global navigation for the hub site. So these are sub-sites to the hub site. So when I come into this Clinic, I can have, and I'm going to go to the home page of the Clinic because I was on a separate page called Human Resources. But when I come into this Clinic site, I can have different navigation like heroes again. I can have upcoming events that are happening. I can have images. I can have different news, and they can drill in and see details about the news. I can have just quick links, and then they can click on the news that they want to get more information about. So we can have, and I just kind of put in a couple of just weather things. I've got some quick links that we can have. So lots of different ways to access information. But how is this different than a communication site? Well, if you look at the left-hand side, I have access to Teams, Microsoft Teams. I have access to a OneNote notebook by default. We have access to communicating conversations and different things directly related to Microsoft Teams. Now, from here, I could access Teams, but just so you know, if I go into Microsoft Teams, let me show you my Microsoft Teams here. On the left-hand side, you can see the same clinic. Exactly the same as what you're seeing out here, the same logo, because I can access the SharePoint site directly through Teams. So content and communicating with our members of our SharePoint site carries over into Teams as well, where we can have shared planners, we can have shared calendars. It creates a Microsoft group where we can have a shared email address, shared calendars, shared task lists, all kinds of different things. I even have access up at the top of my Teams channels to different information that we can be sharing with the group, with the team of people. But back here in SharePoint, this is where people could start, because we could be providing information that we want the entire team to see. You know, here's some upcoming events. Here's an at-a-glance look at this information. But from the left-hand side, they can drill in to other details. Like if I want to go directly to a specific page, I can click on the name of the page from the left-hand side, like vaccinations as an example. This is a page directly related to the topic of vaccinations, where I can have upcoming events related to vaccinations. I could just provide news information about vaccinations. But if I want to communicate with people, I could actually go to Microsoft Teams from the left-hand side, or if I already had Teams open, I can access it that way as well. So I'll just say open, takes me back into Teams, and I'm on the general channel. But notice there's a vaccinations channel as well, where we could be doing chatting about vaccinations. We could share files about vaccinations. From Teams, I could even have a link to take me to that SharePoint site. So I can have a hyperlink from Teams to get to my SharePoint site. So when Alan earlier mentioned that connectivity that we have with SharePoint and Teams, it's huge. It's unbelievable the connection we have back and forth, not just to Teams though, but in SharePoint, we can have access to several other Microsoft apps, Forms, Planner, OneNote, etc., etc. All of our 365 apps can be accessible directly through SharePoint. We even have the integration with Outlook from SharePoint. So those are things we plan for. So when it comes to using a SharePoint site, you want to kind of be planning about your navigation. So if you have a SharePoint site that you've been kind of looking at and following along as we're doing our session today, the first thing that you're going to be able to tell if you go into a SharePoint site is look to see if you have navigation on the left, and look at the name of the site at the top left. Does it have the Teams icon next to it? If it does, it tells you it's a Teams site. But if I jump back into my healthcare site has navigation going across the top, not on the left. I know it's a communication site because they are different by default, but both types of sites can use the same web parts. Both can use the same web parts. What's different about a communication versus a team site is the team site is going to automatically, the team site is going to automatically give you quick connection directly to Microsoft Teams. The communication site does not, unless we put a link to a team, which we could technically, but it doesn't have that background of being connected by default to a team. So if I were to give you recommendations on, let's say you're going to create an org chart, an org-wide intranet for everybody within your company, you want to have an intranet. I would say create a hub site, which is a communication site. I would say create a department site for every department, which everybody in your company will have access to. Both the hub site they'll have access to and the department sites. In each department site, have a team site that is for the staff members of that department. You might even have a different site related for managers only. So kind of think about how you need to organize and who needs access, who needs the permissions to get to those sites. Once you kind of have that figured out, then figure out what are you going to put on each of the sites. How are they going to navigate? What do you want them to see at the top and then going down? We don't overload a home page to a site. So right now I am on the home page of the clinic site. I'm not going to overload this page that everybody's going to have to scroll down for days to find what they need. We want to only need them to scroll a little bit. We want to give them links to get to where they need to go. Whether it's going to be to a document library, it's going to be to a page within your site, wherever it is that they need to get information from, give them links in the first couple of sections of the site homepage. I've mentioned document libraries quite a few times already. Let's go into a document library. So I have a document library called Legal Documents. You can have as many document libraries as you need, which there's a little bit of planning that you want to think about with your document libraries. Every site has a main document library. It's called Documents. Kind of like in File Explorer, you had My Documents, Documents folder. SharePoint does that same thing, where it's going to give you a Documents folder. Documents library is what it is, where you can store files. Well, you can create other document libraries to have those be specific to the files you need to store in them. So these are all my legal documents, because I might want different workflows. I might want different permission levels just for this document library. I'm not going to put, I almost said the word dump, it kind of sounds strange, sorry. I don't want to put all my documents in one place. We design our document libraries a lot different than what you would imagine back in your network drives or your C drive. We design things a little bit different here in SharePoint. We create a separate document library to store related information. So this happens to just be all my legal documents. I can have folders within my documents, my document libraries, but otherwise I put files in here, which in the basic class, the kind of that getting started with SharePoint, we talked more about this. But what's important is thinking about who needs access to this document library. Where should they be able to get to this document library? So it's on the permission levels, you need to think about that. Now, when it comes to, of course, using the files within your document library, you could create workflows. So as an example, if I go to this new legal paperwork and I need to have somebody approve this file, I can do so by right-clicking on that file. And these are things you want to plan for. I might need to go into my Automate, and I may do a request for sign-off. when I click request for sign off for that document, I can build a workflow on the right-hand side of my screen, which is using Power Automate, the Microsoft app called Power Automate, where I can then say, you know, who needs to approve this file, but it's going to show me what apps it is actually using. This is kind of cool because it's not just SharePoint. So when we talk about this big happy family of Microsoft 365, I'm not just using SharePoint. I'm using Approvals app. I'm using the Notifications app. So if I go to the bottom and I click Create a Flow, it's going to take me into setting up this workflow that will automatically send an email to the person I want the workflow to go to for them to approve this or decline it. So who's going to be the approver? I'll say that my other computer here, student one, is going to be the approver. It's going to send them an email. So I'm going to want to put a message in this. And then I would say, you know, please review this file and accept or decline to move forward. Move forward. So something on that line, and then I would click run flow. You know, something as easy as that can be done through a document library or even a list, a Microsoft list. So it's been sent for approval. My other computer is going to get an email that is going to say, here's the file that needs to be approved. They can click on a link to open it. They review the file. They can then say, yes, I approve or I decline. It carries over to Microsoft Teams as well. So that connectivity back and forth, if I come back to Microsoft Teams from my activities, I can see I could either approve or reject it from email or through Microsoft Teams by going to my activities. My activities is showing me the flow of this, that whatever it is that I need to approve or decline. So I could see I approved some of these. Somebody sent me a request. So we have that full connectivity from SharePoint to Teams to Outlook to notifications to approvals to the workflows being done through our wonderful features that we have with our Power Automate options. It's unbelievable what can be done, but I can't stress enough about the planning side of things. Don't just start creating a site and inviting a bunch of people to the site without planning it and building it first. Yes, you're going to make changes to it along the way, but you want some content to be here so that when they come to the site, they're not going to say, well, why am I here? I'm never going to come back to this. They don't even have anything here. You want to have buy-in of people using the site. So get the main content done first. Think about how you're going to set up your document libraries where you're going to be able to do live collaboration and, you know, have multiple people have access to the files, or you might have a list that you're going to have multiple people use. I have a policy list where this is not exactly like Excel or not exactly like a database. It's kind of an in-between. We could do a whole session just on lists. It's so great. But lists have custom columns with data types, and we can create workflows from here as well. An example would be, I have a Microsoft form on my SharePoint site. Somebody's going to fill out the form, they're going to submit it, and I could have a workflow that says, I want to send it for approval, you know, because maybe it's a vacation request. They're going to send it for approval to this person. They have to approve it. Once they approve it, if they approve it, I should say, if they approve it, it's going to email the person back saying it's been approved and I wanted to add it to this list, or I wanted to add it to an Excel spreadsheet. That can all be done through a SharePoint site. SharePoint has a name of Share because of the fact that this is where you want people to go to get information that you're sharing as an organization. You want a one-stop shop, basically, for everybody to be able to get the information that they need about your organization, about your department, for the staff members, etc. But yes, we have the connectivity of all of these other apps. And even if your organization is using Salesforce or another third-party app, a lot of third-party apps work with SharePoint. They work with our AI. They work with Power Automation features. So we can be creating workflows with those as well. They can be connected into SharePoint, and they can be connected inside Teams. They're all available to each other, these apps that we use, but plan for them. When you go to create a new site, you're going to be able to choose. And let me just walk you through this real quick, just so you can get an idea. I'm just going to jump into admin. Not that that's the only place for me to create a site, but if I go into my SharePoint admin, I can go into my active sites and I will see and be able to manage all of my active sites. I also can create a new site. When I create a new site, this is where you're going to choose, is it going to be communication or is it going to be a team site? If you create a team site, the navigation's on the left, it's creating a Microsoft group. So I mentioned that once before, the Microsoft group side of this. Let me show you a little bit further on that group for just a second. Let me show you my Outlook. I'm going to go into Outlook here and show you the connectivity to our groups. So I'm in Outlook, and on the left-hand side, I went to my groups and I click Clinic. This is that same Clinic site that is a SharePoint site that is connected to Teams, but it's a team site, so we have this group. I can have a group calendar, and we can add events and department meetings and whatever to that calendar in SharePoint through Teams or through Outlook. Isn't that unbelievable? So it's all in where people are at the time. I don't have to be in just one place to do things. So just to show you up at the ribbon here, when I'm in this group called Clinic, which is my SharePoint site group, I have access to my SharePoint files from here. I can go into my shared OneNote notebook from here, from the ribbon up at the top, or I can click on Calendar. If I click on Calendar, it just opened up the shared Clinic calendar, where we can be putting in our department meetings or anything else that we have that is related to that team of people. Unbelievable what we have. So we have an email address with this and everything. So when I'm talking about creating a team site, you really have to decide, is it just for communicating information to my group or to whichever group of people it is, or are we going to want to do connectivity? We want to communicate with each other. It would most likely be a team site then. Okay. But most of your, intranet hub, your department pages that everybody in your organization is going to have access to, those are usually done as a communication site. Not that it can't be a team site, but usually it's a communication site. Then we have sub-sites to those that are usually the team sites. Okay. But as you saw, not that a team site can't be a main site, because it can look just like any of the others. So a communication site and a team site have the web parts, exactly the same web parts. But just to take it a little bit further on this team site for right now, on this left-hand side notebook, we automatically get a OneNote notebook to share with everybody that's a member or an owner of that team site. So we can come into a shared OneNote notebook directly from SharePoint. Okay, lots of options all depending on what it is that you need people to have access to, whether it's a SharePoint site or a communication site. Every site can have multiple document libraries. So you want to plan out those libraries. So every site can have multiple pages or subsites to them. You can share information from a document library from a list, or you could share a site. So when you get a site built, if you want to add additional people to be members of the site, you could do so by just going to the top right. You could do it a lot of other ways as well, but if I just go to the top right and click share, I could choose who I want to share the site with. I start typing and it looks through my global address list for the people that I want to share the site with. So in the background though, we usually have security groups set up. So we can have these groups that we can say this group has, they can add and edit. So let me back up on here a second. I'm going to click cancel and do it over. When I come in, you can see that it says site owners full control. We have site members with limited control, and we have site visitors with no control. Site visitors are external people. If you have the rights to do external people, that's maintained in the admin side globally. But we also have site members. Site members are usually going to be the people that have limited control. They can add documents to a document library and use all those features. They can delete files from a document library. They can create lists. They can add information and delete information to a list. They can come into the news and view the news. They just don't have rights to add sections and add web parts. They are just members that have rights to add documents, create new documents, those types of things, edit the documents. They can access the calendar, they can see the events, they can fill out the forms, etc. Okay. And just to give you an example of a form, because I've mentioned that a couple of times, let me go back to, I know I have a site here that has a form on it. Oops, I don't see a form on that one. I was thinking it did. Oops, that's the healthcare one. Maybe the training one does. Oh, that one I can't find right now. Let me go back to our intranet. Oops, I don't see a form on there, but Microsoft app called Microsoft Forms, you can actually add a web part. So if I go back into edit, I can add a web part that is a form. So I can have a Microsoft form added, and I'll just say that I want to take an existing form. And a form is questions where they provide the answers. So I can have different forms for different things like vacation requests. Oh, I think I deleted that one already. Sorry. I can have it be for support. I need support, so I'm going to fill out a form and say, this is what I need support on. I can have newsletter. I want to sign up for a newsletter. But here's just a couple of examples where I can have a question, and then we could choose what type of answer. You can have those forms as a button somebody clicks on and it opens the form in a new window, or the form can actually be right there on the SharePoint site. So those are things you want to be thinking about. What type of web parts, what type of content are we going to have on the sites? What type of sites are we going to have? Communication versus team sites. Who needs to have access to those sites? Are we going to have a hub site that is the main site? And then we're going to have different department sites. How are you going to organize the hierarchy? We are going to have document libraries to store and share our documents, our files with everybody, where we're going to have access to being able to check a document out, We will be able to set up alerts. We're going to be able to do workflows. We can have version history on those files as well. All of those features are available in any of your document libraries and lists. We can also be connecting to task lists. So if I'm actually in a SharePoint site and I go into a task list, we can be having a central task list that everybody's going to be using. I was going to get back into that other one, but that's okay. I won't jump back in there right now because we're almost done. But we can have a task list that we're sharing and assigning tasks to everybody that's a member of our SharePoint site as well. So there's a lot of different background things that you need to be aware of when it comes to working with SharePoint. You know, the introduction session that we did is really just, you know, here's how you can navigate. Here's what a document library is and how we use a document library or a list. But this is more on the planning side. You know, who's going to be the administrator, who's going to be the power users, who's going to design things, you know, put in the sections and the web parts and make sure everybody's going to be able to find what they need, whether it's calendars, news, events, how are they going to search the site? Okay. So SharePoint is a powerful tool, but it can be relatively easy for the person that's going to design the web parts, you know, build that side of it. So you need multiple levels of people. Okay. So Alan, did we have any questions from the group today?
I'm not seeing any questions from the group, but I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, I mean, you know, great advice on planning. I mean, that's kind of the number one advice I think of all time, to, you know,
Yes.
think before you act and really spell it out. And I guess I'm just wondering about that person who's going to design a SharePoint site for the first time, maybe kind of being stuck on where to even start with planning. And I'm wondering, does Microsoft have any tools for that? Or I'm almost thinking like of a wizard that might prompt them through certain things, or how would you recommend somebody go through that?
Let me show you exactly what they're going to get. So if I'm creating a new site, so I'm back into where I create a new site and I'm going to choose Teams or communication. Doesn't matter which one I do, you're going to get a wizard. So let's say I'm going to do a team site. Well, actually, they would be starting with a communication site. Even if they're going to start with building a hub site, it's going to be a communication site, and it's not a hub to begin. We tell it to be a hub later. So I'm going to click communication site. You're going to give the site a name. So maybe I'm going to have this be for ABC Company. And you could see that the address is available because it has to be a unique name. I'm going to put in who's going to be the owner of the site. And then I'm going to click finish. I could go into advanced and say the time zone, but the time zone is set up by default. I'm going to click finish. I could give the site a description as well, but I can come back and do that later. But what's going to end up happening, no matter which type of site it is that you create, it gets added to the active list. So when I come into my active list, I can see here's the one I just created. I'm going to come back and click on the link for the global or for the URL so that it opens the site. By default, they're going to be able to choose a template that they could start with. It also is going to, so let me choose a template. Let me show you this example. So they could choose from all these different templates to get started with based on what type of site is it going to be. So is it volunteer information, new employee onboarding, learning center, human resources, etc. I'm going to say it's going to be a department site. I'm going to click department. It's going to give me more details for it, show me an example. I'm going to say, yeah, I want to use that. I'm going to use that template. I'm already starting on the right foot, but it's going to give you different web parts automatically created. So it gives you the hero at the top. You can then come in and just change whatever it is that you need to by going into edit. We add different sections, we add different objects, but look at on the right-hand side, next steps. So here's the wizard you had mentioned, Alan. It's not technically a wizard, but it's like a wizard where when they're done, they can close it. It's kind of like Publisher used to do. I think it still does, where they can customize the site, they can learn more, share the site with others, but don't do that until you're ready. You might share it with a couple of coworkers because they can help you with it, but they could create a news post, change the look of the site. So it gives them that getting started options. And that's going to be with a team site or a communication site. Love this. Makes it so much easier to get started.
Yeah, that's great.
But just don't invite people till you're ready.
Yep.
Okay.
Makes sense. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions. So Jacob, unless you have any other questions, I think that's a wrap.
Okay.
Yeah,
Think
so
so.
we did talk about the upcoming webinars. These are available right now on our website. So if you wanted to register for all three of them, you certainly could get them on your calendar. But I think this Chat GPT session, I'm really looking forward to. Actually, all of these summer sessions, I think, are going to be nice. A little bit of a change up from the 365 content. And there's really endless subjects we can talk about with 365. But we'll take a summer and look at some different stuff. So thanks for being here, and look forward to seeing you guys in future webinars. And Jacob and Jolynn, thank you both.
Thank you.
See you
Thanks,
soon.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.